It's a lovely 10 degrees Celsius outside. Absolutely lovely weather. Perfect conditions for lying around on the ground, crawling underneath the car. Because I figured we'd replace the speedometer cable in this thing. Because when I was driving the other day, the speedo just stopped working. And the cable's broken. I've taken out the dash and the cable's just not spinning. So I've taken the time to do my research. There are no pirate parts available, so I had to go to Nissan, and thankfully they had one for 150 euros. But here it is, supposedly 150 euros worth of speedometer cable. So it is a rather long thing, so I suppose it's somewhat justified. But we still need to get the bloody thing out before we can get around to putting this one in, and that's not going to be too much fun because this is not the kind of ground you want to be on, but it's what I've got. And the cable's running from back there on the other side of the exhaust pipe all the way, haven't even looked at it, around all this bloody framework and going up somewhere in the front of the vehicle to the dash, and it's just gonna be a royal pain to get out, and I'm gonna be covered in muck and dirt and water and shit while I'm done with it. I was not just took the drill to the end of the original wire just to confirm that this is actually the old cable, and I'm pretty sure that's not supposed to happen. So yeah, this thing has obviously suffered liquid ingress and it's all rusted and horrible and broken. And it's obviously snapped somewhere along the way because it isn't spinning at the other end. And yeah, the wire's not supposed to be 5 centimeters longer than the actual housing, so that thing's absolutely toast. Here's some lovely mid-engine Nissan engineering goodness for you. So we've got this main drop out of the middle of the frame, which is stuck between two solid metal pipes, making it impossible to access with a socket because this pipe is too close, and it's impossible to access with a screwdriver because we've got this giant coolant pipe there, preventing any kind of reasonable angle of attack. Well, I finally got that out using a rather unique combination of all the tools. But now we're moving on to the next fastener. And so the one we just did was just there. I can see the screw hole, can't even access that with my eyes. So now I've actually got some freedom to move the cable around. And watch this. The next fastener is up there, about halfway to the coolant reservoir. Well, you can see me moving the cable about. And if we zoom out of that, that's all the shit that's in the way. So, in order to gather that, I have to remove this bottom cover, this air intake hose, and whatever else coolant lines are around there. And to that I say, fuck that. I'm just not going to bother. I'm going to run the new cable in parallel with the old one, cut the old one and just leave that mount unused, because there's no way in hell I'm disassembling this vehicle to that extent in 10 degrees heat on the wet ground in the very oldest spring. That's just not happening, so we're gonna be cutting this line. Thankfully, getting it out of the inside of a vehicle doesn't seem to be a big deal, because if I do that, we can hear it just flowing through the rubber grommet. So I'm waging that if we just grab this and do that, perfect. Now the big question is this a complete set? Because this doesn't look the same as the other cable. It really doesn't. This one's got a big dick in the middle, whereas the new one doesn't. So there's probably going to be some parts reusage going on, because that's not extending out. No erection. So I'm probably going to have to be somewhat careful about how I'm handling this thing. But I think I'll just grab a saw and cut this right here and pull it out, because I think that's just like, that's the coolant reservoir we were seeing, so I don't think there's more than one mount left. So I think we should just pull out if I cut the end of it. Alright, I undid a final clip there, so if my theory is correct, this should just like move relatively freely. Yep, there we go. So that's just one last mount, and we're free to check this thing out. Well, if this wasn't fucked before, it's fucked now. Oh, there we go. So what do we have? We have like a piece of metal stuck into the end of a wire. I was expecting something more fancy, because that looks like something which should really already be installed in the new one. Is that even? No, that's just... that is just a wire pressed into a square. So that's not something we're going to be moving onto a new one. Well, that's weird. How the hell's that supposed to work then? Because this guy does not have the right bits for mating onto that. Nope. They're the wrong genders. Well, that's an issue. Ah, there we go. I'm just being an idiot. If you actually put the wire on something reasonably flat, the dick extends out. So that's going to work after all. What relief. I was afraid for a second there. So let's just rip the old one out using brute force and get the new guy in. So this should just be ready to pretty much pull out. I need to get rid of that guy, because that's going to put a stop to everything. There we go. Now we just pull. There we go. Out you come. Beautiful. Like clockwork. Very broken, rusty clockwork, but still clockwork. And now I think we'll get a beautiful demonstration, rather first person, on how this thing is entirely balked. Yeah. Well, that's not supposed to happen. So now comes the question, do I want to ride the big chunky part with a rubber plunger on it through all the messy little labyrinth of a vehicle, or do I want to pull the part with a giant metal bend on it? Oh, grabby pokey. Oh, ta-da! Sweet. That's done. Now, before we start to connect all this up, I'm going to give some love to this speedometer, because it's so full of old rotting grease. I'm suspecting the friction in this is not what it's supposed to be. and I wouldn't want to overload the new cable for me when I plug it in, so that's going on the bench. Oh yeah, wow, that is horrible. I have to put in proper effort to turn that. If I just grab it down there, I can barely get it to move. Like, for just 2 fingers it takes considerable effort. That's fucked. That needs some fresh grease stat. Hey, look at that. My speedometer's got a bug. Oh man, just look at all this awful dried up grease. This could very well be the sole reason that everything failed to begin with. This is just horrible. It looks more like, well, excrement than it does grease. Jesus. Well, this wasn't anywhere near this bad the last time I had it apart, which wasn't very long ago at all. Oh, it just gets worse and worse. So this is some kind of reed switch to tell something that the wheel is moving, but look at that. That's just wrong, and that, that's horrible. I mean, jeez, this is just painful. Oh, you. This poor little thing, I can't believe I've subjected it to such horror. And here's what's now left of my speedometer. The main issue is that the bushing down here is suffering from way more friction than it should, from the bad grease inside, and I'm thinking some of the really horrid stuff they put on the gearing here has just kind of seeped into there over time and has now made it run rather hard. I have been giving it an absolutely brutal treatment of various solvents and really penetrating fluids like the PTFE stuff there, which will go into absolutely anything. And it has kind of loosened it up a bit. It's no longer absolutely horribly hard to turn, but it's still not where I'd like it to be, and indeed the plastic down there runs warm when you spin it with a drill. So this is it might have already turned into a lost cause, since in taking this apart I had to disassemble the entire speedo thing, and that just went pop and flew into 1,000 little pieces. And this upper actual speedometer part is kept in with this rather horrible factory push thingies, where they've just have this stamped out, and then they've shoved a driver bam to split that tip and squeeze the top part in place. So this just sits on top of that, like so. So I'm not sure if I'm ever going to get this back together properly. I will have to give it a go. I don't feel like trying to source a new speedometer for this thing. No siree. And I'm thinking that the symptom I've seen, which has been a jumpy speedometer, would be caused by some of that grease there just kind of hitting against the spinning magnet of this lower rotor assembly, because this is a spinning magnet which just causes this thing to induce some current in it. You know, just like one of those hoverboard things. Gee, who'd think that Nissan invented that in 1999? But yeah, tons of little bits and pieces are flying everywhere. I've lost my little copper washer again. I know, there we go. This thing went on the floor. Quite a miracle I found it again. But yeah, think about it, I'm just going to take this entire thing and put it in a bath of oil overnight to just try and get any kind of fresh lubricant to seep into there, in hopes of making it a bit more malleable, because this is not going to last long. It would last a year, and then I'd have to just replace the entire assembly, which is not something I'd rather do. There we go. We've got our little beaker of oil with the meter innards sitting on a little hot plate, which is just a flipped over travel iron. But that's gonna soak for a day or two, and hopefully we'll get some of that oil to penetrate. Alright, so I didn't remember where I left off, but I have just constructed this rig to turn the speedometer bearing in hot oil in order to loosen it up a bit. So what I've done is I've taken an old CD-ROM eject motor there, the tray motor, and a rubber band, and I've connected them together, and I'm holding it in place with just a couple of clamps. So let's see if we can make this thing turn around in the hot oil just in order to agitate it a bit, and perhaps in an off chance make it suck some oil into its poor worn out bearing. Would you look at that? Isn't it beautiful? That's fantastic. That's an invention I'm proud of. Right, gonna let that run for a couple more days. This is a roughly 30% diesel to engine oil blend, and it's being kept at about 50 to 60 degrees Celsius, like so. And I just had a feel, and we can turn the motor off, and if we poke that thing somewhere else, this actually turns very easily now. I mean, when I started the turning process, it would not turn if I just used the tweezers, and it'll turn just by magnetically being attracted. So we certainly have made some progress. The diesel oil has definitely penetrated into the bearing. So I think I'm going to be happy with that. And we're going to be taking this thing out and try to reassemble it. This copper washer is incredibly important, irreplaceable, and obtainium which does not belong on the floor. You know what this looks like? This looks like something you literally pulled out of your ass. Alright, slowly but surely it starts to come back together. I actually figured out how to remount this rather efficiently using the original Nissan beating the metal and forcing it to expand method, and that is quite literally what I did. I had to bring out the vise, and I just used a knife and a hammer to first bring the cracks back out open so that I could force something bigger in than I just used. A chisel to very thoroughly whack the metal once very hard with a hammer, and that made it crack open and go and expand enough to hold the front plate in place. This is all starting to look rather good. Everything's working. I have managed to bend the axle for the speedo needle, which is a bit of a shame. It's never going to be straight again, it's just going to snap if I try. But beyond that, this seems to have made it reasonably cleanly. I did manage to scratch up the threading of this axle, so that's a bit coarse. I had to spend quite a few minutes cleaning that up with sandpaper and other scratchy metal tools, but it turned out reasonably well. So at this stage, all I've got to do is just put all the little ancillary things, the reed switch and stuff, in place, and they should, in theory, be good to go. I've just got to figure out how to trim in the actual needle placement. Oh, there we go. I think this should be ready to go. I just gave it a bit of a drill test, i.e. I just shoved the drill in its behind,
and it does shows. It does do exactly what it's supposed to do. Let's see if we can do this one-handed. Adding miles. I think it might be a bit too insensitive, so I'm going to adjust the needle slightly upwards, and then we'll give it a proper speed test for the GPS.